This episode of Gather and Go is brought to you by Visit Atlantic City. Live to explore in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Atlantic City welcomes one and all to the seaside destination where local spirits are connected and the celebrations are unforgettable. Learn more at visitatlanticcity.com. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host. I am feeling refreshed and excited to be back with you for 2025. And I am excited to bring you today's featured conversation with Justin Brady. Justin is a communications pro and expert storyteller. And in today's conversation, he's going to tell us all about how you can identify your travel brand's best story and how customer questions might be the key to growing your online visibility, and how you can use simple communication strategy to grow your sales. This is a conversation you're going to want to hear. I can promise you that. Before we get there, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. New research demonstrates the growing impact of group travel. Recent reports from a pair of influential group travel associations highlight the impact and growth of the group travel industry among both large and small companies. At the large corporate end of the spectrum, the United States Tour Operators Association released an economic impact study showing that its members, which include several dozen of the country's largest tour companies, served 8.4 million travelers in 2024 and created more than $24 billion in economic impact. The study also found that USTOA members employed 14,770 people in the U.S., up nearly 5% from the year before. On the smaller end of the spectrum, the American Bus Association Foundation released its 2024 motor coach census, which found that the North American motor coach industry comprises 2,056 transportation companies, operating over 25,000 motor coaches. The census found that 92% of operators are small regional companies, and among them, 90% provide charter services, and about 32% offer tours. Well, now it's time for the road tip segment of our show. This is the part of every episode where we reach into our bag of travel knowledge from decades on the road and bring you tips to make your next trip less stressful and more successful. Now, we are in 2025, and if you are in planning mode right now, you may be thinking about trips for later this year. Hopefully, you're thinking about trips for 2026. And I want to give you some ideas that might spur you to be a little bit more creative in your travel planning, especially if you think you're stuck in a bit of a rut, especially if your customers are getting tired of the same old thing. I want to give you 5 quick ideas about new types of trips that you should consider offering to your groups in 2025 and beyond. Now, let's jump right in. Number 1 would be a different kind of cruise. If you're like most group travel planners, cruising is part of your group travel toolbox. But many travelers have only ever experienced 1, maybe 2 types of cruises. Now, there are a bunch of different sorts of cruises out there for you to choose from. So I would encourage you to look beyond the kind of cruise you've already done or always done, the Caribbean cruise, maybe the Hawaiian cruise, the Alaskan cruise, something like that, and consider other options. There are fantastic river cruises, of course, on the major European rivers, but also in the U.S. or in more exotic locations, such as on the Nile, on the Amazon, in China, lots of options there. There are also cruises known as expedition cruises that visit places like the Galapagos, Antarctica, other places that are not considered high tourist value, but have a high ecological value. Those cruises are full of adventure. They are kind of pricey, but for the right kind of customer, they promise to be the trip of a lifetime. So if you are in a cruise rut, think about a different kind of cruise. Another thing to think about that I'm hearing so much about these days is a wellness-focused trip. Now, this can be something like a spa trip, a yoga retreat, something along those lines. It's becoming more and more popular in the group travel market, especially among younger people. Now, we are working on an episode later this spring that is going to focus exclusively on wellness travel. I can't wait to share that with you. But if it's something that piques your interest, we have written about it in the Group Travel Leader. Get on our website and check that out. And look forward to more insight coming up on the show very soon. Here's a third idea for you: a train adventure. If all your trips have been by motor coach, consider one that is based on trains. We have some amazing railroads crisscrossing the U.S. that go through some absolutely stunning places. Of course, the same is true in Europe and many other popular destinations. We actually did a whole episode on train travel. It's called Seeing the World from a Train. I'll link to it in the show notes. If you're interested in a slower and more scenic way of travel, this could be a great thing to check out for your groups. A fourth thing to consider would be festivals or events. There are some amazing events taking place all through the year, all over the country and around the world. I'm thinking of music festivals, ethnic heritage festivals, major sporting events, or maybe not even major sporting events, but maybe sporting events that would just be of particular interest to people in the area of the country that you serve. Now, there is more work involved in putting together a festival or event trip, but if you do it right, you might be opening the door to the kind of travel experience that your customers would never be able to have on their own. They will thank you for it, and it makes them more likely to travel with you again other places. And finally, one more idea for you would be to plan a service trip. This, again, is something that is growing in popularity. These are trips where you mix traditional sightseeing with opportunities for volunteering, community service, mission, things like that. If you're interested in that idea, we did a whole episode on this as well. It's called Volunteering on Vacation. I'll link to it in the show notes. Excellent interview with my friend Fred Carlson. That is one that you should check out. And hey, while we're talking about our back catalog, I want to let you know we have more than 65 episodes of Gather and Go available free right now at grouptravelleader.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. So if you're new to the show, number one, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. But number two, don't miss out on that back catalog. Look us up on the website. Look us up in your favorite podcast playing app, and you will find dozens and dozens of hours of really helpful information that will make you a better and more effective and more informed travel planner. Now, before we move on, I want to share a little bit of news from us. Now, you've heard me talk before about our on-site familiarization program. That's a series of fam trips that we partner on with destinations around the country. I've told you about some of the cool trips we have coming up for 2025. I want to give you a couple updates. Number one, on our Louisiana trip that visits Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas, we have a few spots left for this Louisiana Capital City Region fam that is going to take place March 20th through 24th. If you are free during those dates and interested in learning about Louisiana's Capital City Region, you can learn more and apply to attend that fam at grouptravelleader.com/LA-fam. That's like LA like Louisiana-fam. Of course, I'm going to put that link in the show notes, so you don't really need to worry about writing it down. We have a few spots left. It's going to be a great trip. We would love to have you there. Now, I have another opportunity that we haven't told you about yet, but this is going to be a great one, so I'm excited to let you in on it now. April 6th through 10th, we're going to be facilitating a student-focused trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. If you are a tour operator that serves youth and student groups, we want you to be our guest to visit this fantastic and highly popular student destination on the East Coast. The trip is April 6th through 10th, and we're going to be visiting attractions like Ripley's Aquarium. We're going to see some exciting stage shows. We're going to go on eco excursions. We're going to learn about the area's Black history. We're going to take a scenic cruise, and you can bet we're going to eat some great fresh seafood while we're there. Now, applications are open for this trip. They are going to be open until February 28th, and you can get your application in right now at grouptravelleader.com/MBFam, as in Myrtle Beach fam. Again, that link is in the show notes. And I hope to see you there. That's right. I'm going to be on that trip. I'm going to be on the Louisiana trip too. So if you want a chance to meet me, to travel together for a few days, to hang out and have some great conversations, go apply right now for these fams. And while we're on the subject of fams, I want to tell you we still have some more exciting fam trips coming up this year. You can see the list of all our upcoming FAMs, including some that you haven't heard about on the podcast yet, and sign up to get email notifications each time we announce a new trip. You can do that all on our website at grouptravelleader.com/FAMs. All right, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Justin Brady. Before we do that, though, let me remind you, you don't need to worry about taking notes because I'm going to make note of some of the most important things that Justin and I talk about, and we're going to come back and recap that at the end of the show. We're going to have some of that information in the show notes for you as well. And I hope you'll stick around through the end of that recap because after we're done, I want to share some thoughts about the right way and the wrong way to do FAM tours. That's going to be today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss that. We'll be right back with Justin Brady. Atlantic City is ready to celebrate life's greatest moments with thrilling year-round events and attractions. With 24-hour gaming at 9 casino resorts and stellar entertainment throughout, Atlantic City is sure to provide iconic celebrations. Historic, wooden, and more than 5 miles long, the Atlantic City Boardwalk attracts visitors from all around the world as they create their own waterfront memories. You can stroll the wooden way by foot, on a bicycle, or via the legendary rolling chair. Bask in the glowing sun, take a dip in the Atlantic Ocean, or stroll along the white sandy beaches to find the perfect seashell. At the famous and free beaches of Atlantic City, adventure is on the horizon. Known for its thriving culinary scene, Atlantic City welcomes all to explore its famous dining establishments. From celebrity chef hotspots to locally owned eateries, Atlantic City's restaurants are well equipped to accommodate special events for large or small groups, served in unique spaces. Start planning your Atlantic City trip at visitatlanticitycity.com. All right, everybody. My guest today is a strategic communications veteran who has worked with brands large and small to grow their visibility through traditional and new media. After building his own audience as a print and radio journalist, he launched Cultivate Strategies, which helps organizations with inventive ideas build trust among new audiences. He's also interviewed some of the world's brightest business leaders on his podcast, The Justin Brady Show. Justin Brady, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian. This is super fun. I'm honored to be on the show.
I am so glad to have you here. I want to start with the term corporate communications. That's something that if you're on LinkedIn, that's a word you hear. If you're, reading the tech journals, if you're reading the Wall Street Journal, you're hearing terms like that. But I don't know many people that know what corporate communications really means. Or if they do know it, it sounds really stiff. It's kind of opaque. So help us unpack what people mean when they talk about corporate communications, and especially what it means in the context of small business.
Sure. Well, corporate communications could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but corporate communications, basically, it's how do you communicate with the external world? I think PR, a lot of people will incorrectly merge the idea of PR and communications, or PR, they'll merge PR with like getting news. Or getting in the news, and that's what a PR person's job is. Getting in the news is a part of the job, but that's a tiny, small part of the job. So communications is very broad. PR is a little bit more narrow. I don't know if that helps, but there's generally, I see a lot of small businesses have a really big problem with getting their word out and communicating with the general audience. You'd think they'd be better at it, but it's really, really hard.
Yeah. Why is it so hard?
I think it's hard because baked inside of all of us, we are married to our own idea, and we see how valuable our own idea is. And we're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like a lot of your listeners have this unique way of going about their business and about travel planning and about picking the right destination and the nuance that goes with that, understanding the lay of the land. They know a lot about it, and so they naturally see how valuable that is to their customer. They're not wrong, but we often lose sight of the customer's viewpoint and the fact that they're terrified. Like some people are terrified of international travel and knowing the land. I mean, there's a lot there, and so that when we lose track of a customer's where they are in life, how a customer views our product or services, when we lose track of that, there's a communication breakdown. When we tend to talk over their head, or we tend to assume they know more than they do. And so they don't really want to clarify. They don't want to ask for clarification because now they feel stupid. But in general, the bottom line here is that we all think the better idea wins in the marketplace. Like, we have the better product, we have the better service. That's evident to everybody. And I can tell you 100% for certain, it's not evident to anybody. The best idea never wins. The better travel planner, the better small business, never, ever in the history of anything has ever won. It's always the best communicator, the person who knows who their audience is and can use their language to intimately move them to action.
You know, that's so good. And I've heard you talk about that before. I'm thinking of some of our listeners who operate tour companies who their customers mostly come from the region they're based in. You know, same city, same state, something like that.
Sure.
And they know they have 3 or 4 other competitors in the same region who try to capture the same customers. And in their mind, they know, yeah, my trips are so much better than Jim's because, you know, Jim uses 2-star hotels and, you know, he doesn't ever go to a dinner. He just goes to, you know, the little happy hour in the hotel lobby and calls that a dinner and, you know, and half a dozen other things that they do better than Jim. And yet, why is Jim kicking my butt in the marketplace? So how does that person get the message out that my tours are better than Jim's in a way that the customer is actually going to resonate with and respond to with their dollars?
Yeah, I see that a lot. And that really frustrated me when I was getting started on my own little entrepreneurial journey, is that I have this better service, but this person keeps getting in like the local paper. Well, that person had a relationship with the local paper. The local paper had no idea I existed. A lot of people give way too much credit to magazine publishers and journalists, way too much. They're hard workers, but they don't know you exist.
Right.
And so when they have story ideas, they're going to default back to that person they know or that person that was in the news before. Like when they need to source someone for a story, they're just going to do a Google search. They're going to find who's the expert in my area. They're going to call them and say, hey, can you talk about X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And so if you're getting your butt kicked by some local company who has a much inferior product, it's probably because they know the right people, or they have a better story than you do, or they're just better at telling that story. It's pretty easy to fix that. You just make the relationship, tell a better story. But most people think that they can't do that. Well, they can do that.
Yeah. How would you suggest someone start to get outside their own tunnel vision and discover what their story is? You know, you were saying some people, they think they know what's best about them, but they can't communicate it because maybe they don't really know what the customer's looking for. How do you break free of your own limited vision and find the story that is actually going to work?
Yeah, it's about spending time with customers and not selling. And man, that's like, I don't know what that is, but it's really, really hard because when a small business gets a customer in their site, they start to like, well, this is too big of an opportunity not to sell. Basically, it's spend time with and watch the habits of your customers, obsessive over them. And so real briefly, what most people can do is just spend more quality time with your customers that doesn't involve selling at all. And so if you're going to go to, I don't know, local chamber event, if you're going to go to a conference, whatever that is, ask about them obsessively. Don't pitch yourself at all. If they ask about you, that's fine. Go ahead and, oh yeah, sure, blah, blah, this is what I do. But I want to know about you. And build a profile, find out how they tick, find out what keeps them up at night. If they learn you're in travel, they'll probably say, well, tell me about that. Well, travel's intimidating for people. Have you ever been intimidated traveling? Put it right back on them and keep asking them questions. And so, like, I tell customers this all the time. I tell clients the power of just talking to people, taking notes and listening to them. And at the end of the day, it takes time and people just don't do it. And so if you don't do it, your customers are going to run circles around you.
You know, this is making me think of what might be the very first conversation you and I ever had. I'm thinking of a conference like 4 years ago where we had a conversation and you were talking about the importance of figuring out what questions customers are asking. And using their questions to kind of shape your communication strategy, your SEO strategy. Give us, pull back the curtain on that. How does that work? How do you find the right questions? And then how do you integrate that into your communications, your website or your social or whatever it is?
I mean, there are highly technical ways to find out what questions people are asking. But the really simple one is just, again, I just call it the notebook method. It's not, and I actually figured out later Someone else already wrote the book literally on this. His name's Marcus Sheridan. I think it's They Ask, You Answer, something like that.
Yeah.
But the guy's a savant, great dude. And the concept is simple, which is pay attention when customers are asking you questions. Like they're giving you goldmine information. So what I do is I just take, I have a notebook and I write a line on my notebook whenever I'm talking to new customers or existing customers, and that space is reserved for questions. And if they ask me an expertise-related question, like, Justin, tell me about if they ask me a question like that, that's going in my notebook. And that might be a good headline for a blog post on the website or a good topic for a video. That's where all my topics come from, is natural questions people are asking. Or sometimes, if I post something on LinkedIn, someone asks a question, a comment on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty darn good question. So just paying attention to what people are asking you that can be a really great marketing strategy, because if your customers or your potential customers are asking you questions, they're physically asking you those questions, that's a sign. That's a signal that other people are probably asking and Googling those same questions. And as AI search gets more and more powerful, it's going to be more important to be answering questions that people are searching.
Wow. That's huge. So I want you to speak to the solopreneurs, especially in our audience, or people who maybe run a mom and pop company, 2-3 employees like that. These folks have a million things to do. You know this, you're a solopreneur.
Yeah.
A million things to do. And
For
no
sure.
matter how productive your day is, there's 10 things you didn't get to, right? Why should people in this situation carve out the time or the resources to plan and execute a communication strategy or work on getting media coverage or things like that? Why is that going to build their business instead of just being a time suck?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you want to, I guess my initial thing was, well, do you want to grow? If you don't want to grow, then don't do that stuff,
Yeah.
But if you want to grow, you need to communicate to new people. You need to draw new people in. So you absolutely need to spend the time on some type of marketing or communications plan if you want to open up that funnel and keep people coming in. Marketing communications, like the comms stuff, the PR stuff, is more top of funnel and awareness, and then getting people down into that funnel so you can build a relationship with them and sell to them. But relationships come first, and communications, PR efforts, content efforts, that's building that relationship. It's one-sided, but it's a relationship. It's like that weird effect that you have when you watch TV. I don't know if people watch TV anymore, but remember TV news? Remember that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd see your favorite anchor out in public, and there's just some weird effect that you had. You're kind of drawn to them. You wanted to say something, but you're like, hey, watch you on the news. It's so stupid. I can't believe this. It's that weird effect. You have this half relationship, this one-way relationship, and there's just something in you that wants to connect, close that loop.
Yeah.
This is similar concept of PR and communications. We do that all the time. We're putting content out there, putting a good public image out there, and it draws people in. They relate to you. They hear things that you're talking about that they're like, yeah, I've always wondered that. It's a way to build relationships at mass scale that maybe individually you couldn't do yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. So there are half a dozen different approaches you can take to a comm strategy.
Oh gosh.
Maybe more. And there's untold dozens or hundreds of consultants and companies that would love to take your money to coach you through it, tell you how to do it. There's specialists in tourism specifically who would love to coach you.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
And not to say that any of those are bad services, but if you had to walk somebody through figuring out the approach that is best for them based on the natural abilities they have or the time they have or who they have on their staff or the resources they have, what framework would you give them for picking out, okay, this is probably not best for you, but this thing over here has a lot of potential if you're investing in it?
You said something earlier. You mentioned Jim's travel company is crappy. They use 2-star hotels and they're blah, blah, blah. They're worse than I am. That depends on your definition of worse. My father-in-law would like that option, actually. The ultra cheap, kind of crappy, and I some of the stuff he goes to or spends money on, I'm like, what? Really? Okay. Okay. So it really isn't about better or worse. It's about understanding who your customer is and understanding what language they speak. You may not want to do business with the people that are attracted to Jim's business that only does 2-star hotels, and the tour buses they use are 30 years old or older, and they only
I've been on those buses.
Yeah, and they only fly on pedal planes that you have to pedal with your feet. Like that's
Right.
believe it or not, you may not understand that. You may not understand customers actually want that. Some customers might want that. So that's why it's important to understand who your customer is. And this is a huge mistake that even, believe it or not, if you're a small business and you're like, oh, I don't know if we're a big company, we don't need to focus on like developing our actual customer ID. Guess what? Like giant companies I've worked for actually struggle with this too. They don't take a step back and define who their customer is, what their company vision is, and what their company mission is. They're like, that's a waste of time. We know who our customer is. And then I usually say, cool, write it down. And they're like, oh. And it's like, it's we understand conceptually kind of in the amygdala and the hippocampus and those subconscious areas of the brain. I'm not a scientist. I just play one on TV. We understand subconsciously who they are, but then tactically, we can't quite get our hand around it. The only exercise I can always, this is probably the best illustration I can give you is picture Disney's Aladdin. Most people can, if you've seen Disney stuff. And then, unless you're an illustrator, draw him.
Oh, gosh.
And now, I don't know if you did this in your brain, but you just zoomed into the features of Aladdin, and things kind of get fuzzy and disappear. And now you can't see it.
Yeah.
Like you can see it, but you can't see it. And so that's why I tell people, cool, you understand emotionally, you kind of get who your customer is, but until you take the time to write down your vision statement, your mission statement, and who that perfect customer is, you're never going to be able to properly communicate to them in a way that can actually move them to action. So if there's one thing everybody needs to do, it's write down the vision of your company, the mission of your company. And by the way, if you write down the vision and mission of your company, it forces you into a customer ID. And the really other important thing about vision and mission is not only does it establish a communication strategy and a way to communicate with the outside world, but it establishes an internal method of communication. So the reason I actually went down this path is because I was doing strictly PR comms and getting people placements. And then I realized that from a messaging standpoint, when I actually put them in front of a Bloomberg journalist, they like stepped all over themselves and couldn't communicate. And I was like, crap, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I kind of thought like that would be easy for them. Like they work in their own company. They know how to message, right? Nope, they don't. And so I'm like, great, I got to work on messaging. And then I realized messaging, I couldn't work on that and I couldn't get that refined because they didn't even agree on the vision or mission of the company. Like they had totally different mindsets for the company. And when you have completely different mindsets, you can't align all your organization's assets in one focused direction to cause movement.
Wow.
And so that's why I'm like, okay, so now with customers, I got to work on the vision and mission. And then once I added that component, the messaging was easy. The getting them into the right publication was easy. I was able to focus on concentration of their customer, not circulation size. So if there was one company that was like, they wanted to communicate with truckers and they're like, we want to be in the Wall Street Journal. Like Wall Street Journal's pretty cool. Like, they ran my first piece. Like, so I love the journal, but are your customers reading the journal?
Right.
Like what percentage do you think? And he thought, oh gosh, I mean, it's a really sexy publication, but I don't actually know if they really read it. And I was like, well, cool. What are your customers reading? And we figured out Freight Waves. And I'd never heard of Freight Waves. I did a quick Google search. I'm like, oh, it's a trade journal for like trucking. Okay. He's like, cool. How long would it take to get in the journal? I was like, 6 months, maybe if you're lucky, maybe longer, of constant pitching and developing stories. He's like, how long would it take to get into Freight Waves? I was like, 5 minutes, a napkin, and another glass of scotch. And we created like a cool like story angle and pitched it and got a feature in Freight Waves in 48 hours. And way more customers, way easier of a pitch because everyone's competing at the Wall Street Journal to get in there. Not many people, as you know, are competing over trade journal stuff.
Right.
That it's a more niche audience. So there's not a billion people with terrible ideas pitching journalists all the time. It's really, really important if you're going to pitch a trade journal, it obviously has to be a really good story for them and their readers.
Right.
But that's a lot shorter. If the story's good, that's a lot shorter of a path, or a lot shorter of a path. But again, you can't do any of this stuff unless you're all completely aligned in the organization, vision and mission. All internal employees are working together on the same stuff. It's none of this is possible if you don't have that vision, mission, and focus, and if your employees don't share that.
All right. So an entrepreneur says, all right, I'm tracking with you. I can probably carve out an hour a week for content. Figure out what it is, writing blog, doing a video post. I can carve out the time, but I am insecure as a writer, or I don't feel great about how I look on camera.
Yeah.
How important is it to be super polished and professional in these communications versus just to show up and be consistent and authentic with where you really are?
Again, it depends on the audience and strategy. I hate to sound like a broken record, but it really does depend on the audience and the strategy. I will say, just as a general blanket rule, you should be consistent, but you also should be polished to a certain degree. Based on your industry, based on your clientele, that's going to be different. But for the same reason you show up to the local chamber or whatever conference you're a part of or whatever association you're a part of, if they invite you to do a keynote, you're probably, I would hope, you're going to dress nicely, maybe do your hair, maybe brush your teeth.
Right.
You're going to present yourself in a way that's professional. Are you going to wear a black tie? Probably not. But if you're going to the Grammys or Emmys or whatever, are you going to wear a black tie? Probably. So know your audience and know that you want to present yourself in a way that is professional, not overkill, but also if you have a sports brand, like sports travel, maybe you can get away with wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap in your podcast. But if you're like pitching, if you're like working on trips to Paris or Vienna or Barcelona or something, maybe they see a dude in a hoodie and they're like, I don't know if you're our guy, man. This is weird. So again, it goes back to know your audience. And if you're like, man, I want to be super polished and professional, but I can't do that every week. Great. Do it every other week. Batch things.
Yeah.
But it has to be consistent, but it also has to be at a level that your audience will find impressive, and only you can make that call. I can't make it for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that honesty. So you mentioned working with journalists to get that exposure. You have placed your clients in Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, some of the biggest YouTube channels on the internet right now. Are there any keys that you have noticed to finding the right journalist, developing the relationship, and crafting a pitch that's going to break through?
Yeah, it goes back to understanding the fact that journalists don't care about your brand. They don't care about you. They don't care about your industry. If you're seeing a pattern here, it's that they just don't care. Your mom cares about you, I'm sure. That's great. Your family cares about you. Wonderful. But the journalist absolutely does not. But they do care about someone. They care about their reader. And so you need to almost be their partner in creating a great story, and you need to take on the responsibility of helping them reach their readers. When you do this, and when you come with that mindset of value for them, you'll notice getting in publications is actually a lot easier. It's not easy. It's always going to be hard. Even when you do pitch a story that, let's just say, God himself is like, that is the perfect story. It couldn't get any better. There's going to be a journalist that just doesn't see it and doesn't agree. That's fine. And, you're going to have the best pitch in the world that goes on completely deaf ears, and there's nothing you can do about it. But at the end of the day, you need to understand and learn a little bit about journalists and what makes a great story. And to do that, you need to understand their readers. Now, here's the cool thing is if you're targeting the right journalist, their readers are probably the same people as your customers because they should be the same. Because if you're selling, I don't know, like squeaky unicorn toys or something, and you're pitching that at the Wall Street Journal, that's probably going to be hard because their reader's not your customer. So you don't really understand what their reader wants. But if you pitch it at Toys Weekly, making stuff up, then their customer is probably, their reader, is probably going to be in a similar group as your customer. So you're a little bit more tuned in with what they want. And so again, that goes back to circulation concentration, why it's important to know who your customer is. But in general, you need to think like a journalist and think, all right, someone's at night scrolling on YouTube. They're not going to, I can tell you now, they're not going to care about what the travel company thinks. But if you're talking about when the next time you go to Spain, here are the top 3 things you need to see. Well, that might be interesting. That might be really, really interesting. So that's the kind of stuff you need to pitch at journalists. And, these days, understand their readers, watchers, viewers, listeners are on 24-hour cycles. And so if some major news breaks like right now, and you can comment on it from an educated standpoint because you're in the industry, guess when the time to pitch the journalist is? Right now. Right now. Like send them an email right now and say, this thing broke. If you need anybody to comment on it, I can do that. Here are top 3 things. Here are 3 things I can tell your readers. Here are the 3 things I know about. Happy to help.
A great example in our industry would be, when you see those stories every summer about, well, it's going to be the most expensive summer for travel on record. Hotel prices are through the roof, gas prices are going up. Then someone who's a travel expert can reach back out to that journalist and say, well, actually, we have ways of getting around the gas prices and avoiding the airport crowds and, and keeping your costs down from, what you'd pay through Expedia or something like that. So is that the kind of strategy that works with that local person at your daily newspaper in town or at the broadcast news station?
Yeah, absolutely. There are times when you feel like you're giving them a story and you're just putting yourself out there hat in hand, and maybe they can just take the story and run away with it and not credit you at all. Yeah. If you feel a little exposed and you feel as if you've given too much and you've given them something so great and you could possibly be cut out of it, you're doing it right.
Yeah. If I do the work and I build that relationship and I finally get featured on the local news in the trade publication of my choice, whatever, what's going to happen? Is my phone going to ring off the hook? Or is that just one brick in the wall I'm trying to build?
Yeah, Taylor Swift will probably come to your house tomorrow. You'll be an overnight celebrity and have 1 million followers on X. No, that's the assumption because we see that those tiny little stories of that one person that got 1 million followers. Does that stuff happen? Sure, of course it happens. It's rare. It's not going to happen to you. But yeah, I guess maybe it could happen. But in general, those things are they build a positive brand trajectory. There are no overnight successes. Your phone's not going to ring off the hook. But every time you do it, it gives your brand a little bit more momentum. And in many cases, press yields press. In general, no, your phone's not going to ring off the hook. It's just going to be one, like you said, one brick in the wall. That's why so many people, I've had clients in the past, still good relationships with them, but they get this one, one got this feature in something, I don't remember what it was, and then they immediately bailed. And I'm like, hey, this isn't going to make your company. Like, you need to keep doing this stuff. You need to be you got to be top of mind over and over and over again, because the person reading about you right now may say, ooh, I'm going to call Bill or Jim's 2-star hotel service. When I have a cheap, crappy vacation need, I'm going to call that guy. It sounds terrible. That's perfect for me. But then Bill's cheaper vacation service is going to get more notice, and their 1-star hotels are way cheaper. And so people are going to forget about you. Yeah. And so you do need to keep doing that over and over and over. That's kind of how it works. Sorry to tell you all, but you're not going to be an overnight success.
Yeah. But there are ways to leverage that visibility, right? So you can put as seen in, the Lexington Herald Leader on your website. You can quote the journalist.
I have that on my website right now. No, just kidding.
But you can quote the journalist. You can get a hold of that video and embed it on your website. There's lots of ways to leverage that little bit of credibility so that it pays dividends over and over.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That's like getting the Wall Street, as seen in the Wall Street Journal on my site was like killer because, it's the Wall Street Journal, other publications are key trust channels. Everyone's surrounded by a bunch of trust channels. We take shortcuts to absorb new information because we don't just, all information out there is too overwhelming. So we take shortcuts. Those shortcuts are trust channels. And so one trust channel that someone may trust, channel they get information from, maybe a publication. And so if we said the Lexington, because you're in
Lexington
Kentucky.
Herald Leader. Yeah.
Lexington Herald Leader. So if I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm looking through websites and I see that you were featured on there, my natural instinct is, well, journalists do research. They put people through the ringer. They're not going to put on some random psychopath scammer from some other country that's trying to take. They're not going to put them on. This is probably a legit company. And so, yeah, if you get those big press hits, are people going to read it, follow you, do business with you? I mean, maybe if you're lucky. But in general, it's a long game. And those stamps on your website, or the fact that you were mentioned somewhere and you can link to it, that's just a credibility booster. That's big.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Justin, I could take the rest of your day asking you about all these topics. I want to make sure our audience knows where they can find you, where they can find the Justin Brady Show, how they can learn more about what you do, and maybe connect with you.
Justin Brady Show is justinbradyshow.com. And then that also goes to my website. So that's probably the best way. We just had a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers, and I asked him, how did you get over 1 million subscribers? That's crazy. So we just had him on the show recently.
Yeah, excellent. That's a conversation worth checking out. Justin's also a great follow on LinkedIn. You can see a lot of his content there, and so I'd encourage you folks to look him up and connect. Now, Justin, before we let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody. These are just for fun. When you travel, do you book a window seat or an aisle seat?
Aisle. Yeah, because I like to stretch out a little bit. And if I need to go to the bathroom, I don't want to step over anybody.
That's the whole thing. I don't want, especially like an overnight flight, like overseas, I don't want to have to disturb the person next to me.
I love the window. I want the best of both. Maybe I just need to fly private, but I'm going to look for the article you guys published on how to do that for economy class.
Yeah.
I want the window because I love the window, but I do like access a little bit better.
Yeah, I hear you. What's one thing in your carry-on you wouldn't travel without?
I have these sleep buds. They're a combination between an earplug and a headphone. So they sit right underneath your bone. And so they almost look like a hearing aid, but I use those because they play a white noise. And so whenever I'm traveling, doesn't matter what the sound profile is or how noisy or how quiet it is. So I just travel with those all the time. And I always have a consistent sound environment so I can fall asleep really quickly no matter where I am.
Oh, I am envious, especially on a plane. That's
They're
great
awesome.
tip. Yeah.
They're called, the company was bought. If anybody wants to go Google and they're going to go Google Bose Sleep Buds, that company's out of, Bose doesn't make them anymore. A company called Oslo Sleep Buds bought the rights to the technology, innovated and made it better. And so that's the company now.
Yeah.
Anybody was freaking out and saying, I want those and I can't find them. They're called Oslo Sleep Buds or something now.
Yeah. Cool. Good tip. So if you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you be headed next?
Oh, I've never ever been to Japan in my entire life. So it would probably be Japan via this is, I'd of course need first class seats if that's what, are you giving this away? Is this a giveaway?
This is a hypothetical.
Oh, okay. Well, a guy can dream.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Japan is hot right now.
Is it really?
Yes. Everywhere I look, I'm hearing people talk about travel to Japan. So you're definitely not alone in that.
It looks like a really cool place to visit. The culture looks cool. The food looks cool. The nature scene looks cool. The cities look, it's just it looks awesome. I want to visit soon.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Last question. What is one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Ooh, that's a hard one for me because I've done all the things that I've seen or done and travel on the road. I already experienced with someone I love. My wife works remotely and so do I, obviously. And we both travel together. So there are very rare occurrences when she has a business thing and I have one in a different city at the same time. In those cases, we split up, but we travel together. So in some ways, it kind of feels like we're retired already.
Yeah.
And so all these incredible travel experiences we've had on our business trips, we've experienced all of them together. So I guess I don't have an answer for you.
Well, that's a great way to go through life. And your wife works in tourism, right? She's involved with a travel company?
She is, yeah. She focuses on students, so choir and band. So art students, like doing group trips to various destinations.
Yeah, I bet some of the people she works with are in our audience and listening right now. So
I bet you're right.
Yeah, excellent. Justin, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Brian. This was so much fun. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Justin Brady. You know, if you ever get a chance to sit down and talk with Justin one-to-one, it is an opportunity you should definitely take. But the next best thing might be listening to his podcast, The Justin Brady Show, where he interviews thought leaders and entrepreneurs from across the business spectrum. Some really incredible conversations right there. So I do encourage you to check that out. Now, my conversation with Justin was so good that we went long. In fact, we talked for about 45 minutes, longer than I had time to play here on the podcast. But do not fret. If you want to hear more from Justin, you can catch the entire uncut conversation on our YouTube channel. That's right. You check out Gather and Go on YouTube, and you will hear Justin and I discussing some topics that I didn't include here on the podcast. You'll hear Justin describe how companies like Toyota and Harley Davidson really get to know their customers. He's going to talk about why you, yes, you, should start a podcast, a blog, or a YouTube channel for your brand, no matter how small your organization is. And you're even going to hear how Justin gets clients featured in big name publications such as Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. That's all on our YouTube channel. I will link to it in the show notes. Now, I want to hit a few of the highlights of things that Justin had to say that I think were really perceptive, because for anybody trying to build brand recognition for really any kind of small business, but especially a small travel business, I think these are key points to remember. Now, when Justin and I were talking about communications and why it's so hard, Justin said, baked inside all of us, we're married to our own idea. We see how valuable our own idea is, but we often lose sight of the customer's viewpoint. When we lose track of where a customer is in life and how they view our product or services, there's a communication breakdown. We tend to talk over their head or assume they know more than they do. He went on to say, we all think the better idea wins in the marketplace, but I can tell you 100% for certain the best idea never wins. The better small business has never won. It's always the best communicator, the person who knows who their audience is and can use their language to intimately move them to action. You know, I've heard Justin talk about this before. The first time he said it, I honestly didn't believe him. I didn't want to believe him. And then I heard him talk about it again, and I started to think, you know what, he may have a point here. Now I'm convinced that Justin is absolutely right. You can have the best product in the industry. You can run the best tours. You can go to the best places. You can have the best prices. You can create the best value. But if you don't know how to communicate that value, if you don't know how to communicate the innovation in a way that resonates with your customers and scratches the itch that they already have, you're going to get beat over and over by people who aren't as good, but know how to tell their story better. So on that topic of story, when I asked Justin about how people should go about finding their best brand story, he said, it's about spending time with customers and not selling. Get your head out of the data, go talk to people, go listen to them, go observe. Spend time with them and watch the habits of your customers. He said you need to spend more quality time with your customers that doesn't involve selling at all. Ask them about them obsessively. Don't pitch yourself at all. Build a profile, find out how they tick, find out what keeps them up at night. I thought this was such an insightful comment from Justin. It is such an instinct for anybody in business to try to seize every opportunity to capture a sale, especially when they meet a new person who seems like they might be a good lead. And of course, there are moments when you need to be in sales mode, but Justin is really perceptive here. If you are struggling to identify your brand story and tell it effectively, spend time with your customers or potential customers and don't sell. Just talk to them. Just ask them questions. Just find out what they want, what they need, what's on their minds, and then use that information you get from them to determine how you can deliver products and experiences and services that do what they want, that answer their questions, that overcome their challenges. And that is going to be the key to unlocking your brand story. And finally, when I asked Justin why busy entrepreneurs should go to the effort and expense to develop and focus on a communication strategy, he said, if you want to grow, you have to communicate to new people. You have to draw new people in. You absolutely need to spend time on some kind of marketing or communications plan if you want to open up the funnel and keep people coming in. He said, we're putting content out there and it draws people in. They relate to you. It's a way to build relationships at mass scale that you couldn't do yourself. You know, if you are a small business owner or especially a solopreneur, I get it. I feel your pain. You have so many things you could do. And at the end of every day, you go home with a list of all the things that you didn't accomplish at the forefront of your mind. But I think Justin is absolutely right here. If growth is part of your strategy, then communications has to be as well. If you're not interested in growth, then hey, no big deal. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to grow, if you want to acquire new customers, or to put it in a much more positive way, if you want to make a bigger difference on your community, on the places you visit, or on the world, you have to grow. And growing is going to require telling your story and doing it over and over again in a way that people can relate to so that they come to trust you. And then once they trust you, they'll be ready to travel with you. Great stuff there from Justin Brady. So earlier in the show, we talked a lot about FAM tours, FAMs that we are going to be hosting coming up this year. And it got me thinking, there are a lot of possibilities on FAM tours, but also a lot of pitfalls. And it could be whether you attend FAM tours or host FAM tours that you are unwittingly making some mistakes. And that's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the show where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered thoughts on an issue that impacts travel every day. And today we're going to ask the question, are you doing FAM tours wrong? So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. So in more than 20 years of travel journalism, I've been on well over 100 FAM tours. Most have been awesome, but a few have been train wrecks. There are two things that can make or break the success of a FAM: the planning of the host and the quality of the attendees. If you're hosting a FAM, you need to be well organized and well prepared. You also need to be flexible enough to handle unexpected events or requests, and you need to remember that your visitors are human. Running them ragged from dusk till dawn is counterproductive. If you're attending a FAM, you need to be professional. Don't go on a FAM unless you think there's a real potential to bring business back to the host organization. And while you're there, be attentive, be courteous, and be on time. Listen, take notes, ask questions, but don't be a diva. FAMs can be great if you do them right, so don't be the person who ruins them for everyone else. And that's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. Of course, as always, you're welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send your thoughts, questions, FAM tour horror stories to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every message that comes into that address. I love hearing from you. And hey, you never know. Your ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Go to your favorite podcast playing app. And while you're there, if you haven't already subscribed to the show, hit that subscribe or follow button. And give us a rating, leave us a review. Those are super helpful. I'm so thankful to every one of you who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Justin Brady for joining me today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you an awesome conversation with Jeff Jenkins of the hugely popular travel blog, The Chubby Traveler, and National Geographic's TV show, Never Say Never. We're going to talk about making travel attractive for everybody. This is a conversation you definitely won't want to miss. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Danya Simmons is our creative director. Ashley Ricks is our circulation manager and graphic designer. Our sales team is Kyle Anderson and Talisa Reck. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information about our magazines, podcasts, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com. This episode was sponsored by Visit Atlantic City. This vibrant city awaits your arrival, and the knowledgeable staff is on hand to assist you with everything you need to make your group visit a success. Learn more at visitatlanticitycity.com.